Remember last week when we had Brian Smith to talk about Jonathan Echols maybe flipping to Florida? We got a little more information about that with Brian Smith here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Joining me now for this bonus episode of Locked On Gators is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. And Brian, you were here on Thursday's episode. We spoke about a few players, but one that you did get to see in person on Wednesday night at the IMG Spring Scrimmage, tight end Jonathan Echols, currently committed to the Tennessee Volunteers. How did he look at the scrimmage?
This is why you have 30, 40 offers. He was one of the first guys out there running around. He was getting timed. He was doing some different stuff with a company called Catapult. They measure body metrics and all that stuff that is way beyond my means. But they picked him for a reason. That's also something that's very noticeable. So I was watching him because he's starting to understand that this is something he can do long term. He has the physical ability to eventually play in the NFL. And I don't like projecting a lot of kids to the NFL. That's, he's not old enough to vote yet. You know what I mean? But at the same time, he's 6'5", 6'6". He's very lean, and he can break down and make cuts, unlike most guys his size. So he's not even close to a finished product physically either. So he needs to work on blocking and whatnot. But when you put him in the slot or out wide, he's not a guy that many DBs can do much with. He's just too big. So it creates a lot of problems in terms of matchups and how a team would even call a coverage. Because if a quarterback has a connection with Echols, what are you going to do? Put a linebacker on him? He's not going to cover him. At least he would have size, but he's not going to cover him. So his mismatch is why he got all those offers. I forget how many he has. I'd asked him recently, but it's insane. So Echols also has something else that you can't really teach, and that's just he's a personality that you want to be around. He's fun. He's easygoing. I'm sure that probably helped with his recruitment too. But physically, man, just like the wingspan and all that, he's off a computer screen.
Yeah, I'm curious because you mentioned Catapult, and I know that Catapult works with like college football teams and NFL teams. I'm curious if that ever goes into if a college team is ever like, oh, well, this is his miles per hour according to what Catapult tracked him as with their little thing that they put on.
Oh, it matters.
I'm curious if Alabama's ever been like, oh, all right, well, now we want him because he runs this fast.
They sell that information. That's a company that sells a ton of. They work with XOS and some other scouting services. That stuff, like when I go to 7-on-7, Echols or anybody else, some of these elite players will have that on underneath their, and they mic them and stuff sometimes for fun, different things. But that information all goes to colleges instantaneously. As soon as the data is downloaded, they push a button and it just goes out to every school. So absolutely it does.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned that obviously you saw Jonathan Echols in person there. You spoke to him in person there.
That's right.
Did you pick up any feelers for the latest with his recruitment?
Well, despite being committed to the Tennessee Volunteers, I just asked him point blank. I said, hey, man, it's listed that you're visiting the University of Florida on June 2nd. Is that accurate? Yay or nay? And he said, yeah, definitely. And I started talking to him. I said, well, what's the draw? And he said, well, I've got connections there. And I'm like, connections? What are you talking about? He's got a family member that's a student at UF. He's more familiar with the school than I had no idea. So anytime family's involved, you obviously have a better shot. And he's definitively interested. And he said the coaching staff, he gets along with the UF staff. So like anybody else, man, everybody that's watching the show is about the logo. I get it. They're UF fans. As a general rule, I'd say 98% of the kids pick a school based on the coaches representing that logo. It's completely different. I know fans don't want to hear that, but it's just true. Whoever got it going, I don't know, but he mentioned staff. So this is multiple people. So I didn't even delve into, okay, it's Coach X, Coach Y, whatever it is. He's enamored with the Florida staff. So hats off to them. This kid can go to any school he wants pretty much. So Florida's going to get a visit. And in the middle of the month, the Volunteers will get a visit. honestly, before you ask, because this is the logical next question, when's he going to make a final decision? I don't think he knows. I honestly don't. And if you're really looking at it from a perspective of, is it worth recruiting him all the way through? The answer is yes. It is most definitely worth it. He's a kid that can change your offense. You and I were talking off air about Florida doesn't have enough playmakers right now. Well, Jonathan Echols is a true playmaker. So I'm not saying he's Kyle Pitts, but he's built like him. There's only one Kyle Pitts. I'm not doing comparisons in that sense. Anybody that does is insane. He's the best flex tight end I've ever seen at the college level. But his frame is like almost identical. So now it's just fine-tuning his craft, understanding what he needs to do in the weight room and his nutrition, and keeps getting better. Again, I was out there an hour before the scrimmage started at IMG, and he was already out there working out. His mentality is what you want. So that, that might also be why UF and all these other schools are checking him out. So they were probably at that scrimmage. I don't even know how many SEC schools were there. Auburn, Georgia. I mean, it was just everybody was out there. So it's insane to see all that. But you got Echols running around and different guys that are still thinking about taking visits. It's a pretty good reason. So Florida might get a steal from one of their rivals here.
Hopefully. I am curious. Did he mention which family member he has at Florida? Because as I'm thinking of it now, I'm like, there's a Charlie Echols that plays softball for Florida, and I'm curious if that's.
I think that's what it was. It's an athlete.
Okay.
I think that's what it. Softball, volleyball, something like that. But it's a female, if I remember right. So yeah, that would make sense. So, but again, I had no idea.
I didn't make the connection either, and I knew she's there. It's almost June. I don't know about you, but that doesn't make me feel great because, I slept on it. But I'm trying to get right before we get to July, which is my month. But luckily for me, Built Bar is there to help me every single step of the way. Built Bar is coated in 100% chocolate, so hits my sweet tooth, which I don't know about you, but that's like the thing that kills me there. Most bars have just 130 calories, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein, and they're now in stores. So you can go to the old usual Built or BuiltBar.com, all reliable, or you can go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club and get yourself that Built Bar. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook, and it's my #1 sportsbook. I need to tell you about the insane bet that I hit on, Friday night. Because I'm a Mets fan, so, I like to bet on the Mets. And on Friday night, I bet that, where are you? Brett Beatty would hit a home run. He did. Francisco Alvarez would hit a home run. He did. Carlos Carrasco would have 2.5 strikeouts. He had 3. Cal Quantrill would have 3.5 strikeouts. He had, I think it was 6. And over 8.5, and the game was 9-10. Both teams went over 8.5 individually. I'm not going to talk about how much money was bet or how much money was made, but I will tell you the odds were plus 29,949, which means that if you would have bet $100, you would have made $30,000. So that's what I will give you there. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more.
It's amazing sometimes when these things happen, man, because you never know who's going where to school. Yeah. So it is what it is.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, like I saw the name and I didn't even think about it, but Charlie Echols makes sense. She transferred from, I believe, Michigan State to Florida a couple of years ago, and she's been just killing it. So it makes sense to have that family. How much do you think that really plays into it, where he's got family there? The path to early playing time is obviously there. And you look at, I'm assuming his recruitment, again, I know you don't know this because you didn't talk specific coaches. I'm assuming his recruitment started with William Peagler, who was the tight end coach last year, who was also at Michigan State before that. And then now is with Russ Callaway, who used to be offensive coordinator for Samford and is now tight end. So I'm assuming there's been some change there, but you've got a better tight end coach than you had last year now. So with all these factors, I feel like it makes a lot of sense for him to be like, yeah, Florida should be, or at least from my Florida fan perspective, I feel like the selling point is there, where it's like the coaching staff has improved at your position. You've got family there. You've got, immediate playing time is there for you. So at least from my perspective, it makes a lot of sense to kind of make that connection for Jonathan Echols to flip from Florida, which hopefully soon. I'm
That matters, man. Like if you don't have connections with kids, it doesn't matter what the logo is on your polo. They're not coming. They're not coming. I mean, I talk to kids all across the country. That's a consistent, everyday, no doubt about it kind of deal. It's relationships. Every time I ask a kid, I already know the answer, but I just want it for on the record. It's relationships. If you don't have that, you're not going to get it. And like just as a backstory, Napier is really good at being on the phone with kids and talking to them. I've heard that number of times. So he's trying to build relationships with kids. Some of the guys that I knew well that were from the Central Florida area that he's gotten, they all said the same thing. So he's going to hire guys that try to do that too. So if Echols ends up coming, it's going to be because of a staff effort. And that's very important for the long-term Gator overlook on recruiting.
Yeah, and before I do let you go, I am curious because right now Florida only has one pass catcher in their class, and it's Isaiah Williams, who we spoke about before, and we know that you're very hot. How does that kind of really improve your pass catching group for this 2024 recruiting class, where you didn't bring in a tight end last year? You didn't bring in a big bodied receiver last year either, but now Jonathan Echols could kind of address both of those. We'll see how good he would work out wide, but he'd be able to address both of those early.
I think it's absolutely imperative they get at least one guy in that realm. And, as we were talking about physically, how many of those are there in a class? 2 maybe in the country. So it's up to him how good he's going to be, like any other young man, but he would be able to solve, at least theoretically, to your point, 2 different things at once, because he runs more like a big receiver. He's not a burner, but he's 220 some pounds, but he's also a kid that is just now starting to fill out his frame. His upside was really good. And I mean, just again, to use Pitts as an example, he wasn't anywhere near where he ended up when he started at Florida. He was a guy, there were some questions about his effort and all this kind of stuff. Well, Echols is way better than Pitts coming out of high school. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting. If he went to Florida, he'd have a chance to play early because they need a big tight end that can stretch the field. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping every time we talk, I feel happier about this, or more comfortable about this commitment. And I'm just so ready to be hurt again, because that's just how things happen with the Florida Gators. But thank you so much, Brian. This is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. Catch him all throughout the Locked On College channel and Locked On Gators now multiple times every week.
Take care. Thank you very much.